Okay, the format of the evening is as follows. After these introductory notes, Martin's going to be giving us his talk on the night sky, what he's going to be telling us that we can go searching for another one of those dim fuzzy comets and a few other fuzzy objects in the sky. And when Martin has completed his talk, he'll hand back to me and I will try and sort out if there's any transmission issues that we've had on the way. Other than that, I will then be handing over to Jerry, who's going to be talking about space exploration. And then following Jerry, I've got some more news for you, some exciting things to share with you at the end of that meeting.
I'll share my screen and hopefully you don't need to look at me anyway. It's mainly to talk about my presentation. So I'll put share screen. Hopefully, if I do that, you should be able to see my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, cool. Okay, then, right. So, yeah, today I'm going to talk about a few items that are of interest in the sky at the moment. Hope you can all hear me okay. So, at the moment, we've got Comet Atlas, which has been with us for its second year now, but it's coming very close to the sun now. So, it's probably as bright as it's going to be, and it's not particularly bright. I mean, the comet's total magnitude at this point is 9.9, which is pretty faint, but you should be able to pick up with a telescope or a pair of binoculars if you know where you're looking in the sky. So if I just swap to my other application, to Stellarium, assume that you're all familiar with Stellarium. It's a free product on PC and I think also for Apple I as well. For the iPads and for your mobile phones, I think it's a couple of pounds or something like that. But it's a great little program. So I'm just talking about the Comet Atlas at the moment. Currently, at the moment, she is about here, just coming down past Capella. And hopefully you all know where to find Capella. She's very bright at the moment in the west sky. She's going down with the sun virtually. But if you follow that line down, all the way down, and I'll show you in more detail later, eventually, towards the end of the month, it's going to be in line with the Pleiades, which are here. So I think, and in my presentation, I think I've got the date for that. The only problem is it's getting very close. You're only going to catch it. You're only going to catch it just before sunset. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But at the moment, it's right up here. So you can, if you can get a telescope or some binoculars trained on it, you should be able to see it quite clearly. I'll just pop back to my presentation. So a little bit of information about Comet Atlas. It was discovered last year. It's got an orbital period of just over 6,000 years. It was discovered last December. It orbits the sun, and so the magnitude is 9.9. Interesting little image here that Hubble took of it as it's actually breaking up at the moment. So, but obviously they're quite big chunks you can see here from the image. It's not like it's just going to disappear. So that's of interest as well. Be interesting to see what happens after it reaches perihelion and comes back out round again. What's going to be left of it or not, as the case may be. So yeah, that's the next image is what I was talking about earlier on, exactly where you're going to find it. So here, here's Capella here, and this is what I was showing you earlier on. It's coming down here. Here's the date. So we're on the 13th, which is here roughly. So if you went out, if it was clear tonight, and it looks like it could be, if you come along to Capella and go along to the right, and then train your binoculars or your telescope in that area, you might catch sight of it, depending on how clear it is. As I say, the problem is you are following the sunset here, so it's still not very dark. But just for a matter of interest, as it comes down 27th of May, 29th of May, it's almost parallel with the Pleiades here, 31st, and then by the end of the month, it's going to be in the sunlight, basically, and you won't be able to see it at all. So it's your last chance to see it before perihelion. So I'll leave the comet now and go on to the next event, which is on the 24th of May. And we've got the Moon, Mercury, and Venus in very close proximity visually for us. So if I pop back to here, and let's go to our date in. So where are we? There we go, date. We go to the 24th. Let's have a look here. So we'll zoom in, there's the sun there. So if we zoom in here. All right, we've got Venus here. So Venus here, Mercury here, and a new moon here. So it's only going to be a sliver you're going to see of the moon, but it's not very often you get an opportunity to have Mercury as high as that. So it's a really good opportunity if you've got a telescope. You can see with the naked eye, it will just appear as a little white dot. But if you can get a telescope with a pair of binoculars on it, it's quite nice to know exactly where it is. So there's the Crab Nebula there. So we're moving into the summer skies now. So we'll lose the Crab very shortly. That's really a winter object. So there we go. That's that section. So what I'd like to look at now is some of the things that we can look at, certainly with binoculars, and some you can see on a really clear night with the naked eye, and that's some of the globular clusters that we can see in our night sky. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here and put the land in again so we know exactly where we are.
Okay, Martin, can I interrupt you there, Martin? We're not seeing stellarium at the moment.
Okay, right. Let's stop share and start it again and see what happens. If I stop the share, open my stellarium up. And then start the share again. Oh, no, I can't see it. Hang on. I've lost the share. Oh, yeah, share screen. All right. 5 point stellarium. Let's try that. I think each time you change, you have to change it with this, so I need to remember that.
Okay, yeah, we got it now.
I think each time I change my screen, I need to stop the share and start the share again. That's fine. That's another little thing I need to remember. Okay, so did you miss all that with the stellarium before? Okay, well, I can always go through it again if anybody wants to. So anyway, let's look at some clusters. So I'm going to turn around here, and this is most of them actually on the southeast side or the east part at the moment. I'm going to zoom in here. In stellarium, if you've got deep sky objects and clusters marked, they come up with these little yellow blobs. So if you click on them, I'll tell you exactly what we are. So there's M3, which is a globular cluster. And if I zoom in, we can have a look. Let me give you a little image, not a very accurate one, but an image of roughly what it looks like. It's quite a bright cluster, this one. So if I just stop it moving, a moment. Okay. So yeah, this cluster is a magnitude of 6.2, so you should be able to see it with the naked eye on a clear night, especially if you're in a dark skies area. If I stop share and go back to my presentation. Okay. So here we are. So this is M5, M3. So this is M3 here. This is an image I took this week of M3. So it gives you a better image of what it actually looks like. It's a globular cluster. It's in Canis Venacti. Took that on the 3rd of May. It was discovered on the 3rd of May, sorry. I took this in May as well. It's 33, well, they say 34,000 light years away from Earth, and its age is about just over 11.5 billion years. Radius of 90 light years. So that's something definitely worth having a look at, especially through binoculars, it would look spectacular. So the next one I've imaged, Messier 13, which is in Hercules. It's also known as the Hercules cluster. If we go, I'll just show you these images first, and then I'll go back to stellarium, and then we can talk about it, and then I can show you exactly where they are in the sky. So Messier 13 is the new catalogue 6205. It's got hundreds of thousands of stars in the cluster. The distance from Earth is just over 22,000 light years. And it's approximately 20 arc-minutes across in diameter. I'll just show you the last cluster. I imaged that one this month as well. In fact, it's on long, so that one. So that one there is Messier 5, which is in, these are all in a similar area. I'll show you on stellarium in a minute. And it's also known as a rose cluster. It's in Hertford. This one's nearly 25,000 light years from Earth. It's in the galactic halo of the Milky Way, NGC 5904 in the new general catalogue. And say with binoculars, it looks extremely, you can see it very clearly. And so in very dark skies, you can see it with the naked eye. But it has a slight pinky effect. So what I'm going to do is stop the share here. I'm going to go back to my presentation, if I may. And share. Okay, hang on. So there we are. That's the three clusters I've looked at. The next thing I was going to look at was this, the present nebula, because it's in Cygnus and it's quite high at the moment. I've just started to image this, so this is more for interest value. But if you've got a telescope, this just appears as a little fuzzy blob in Cygnus. It's in the neck of the Swan. I'll show you in a minute on stellarium. The magnitude is 7.4, so it is quite bright for a nebula. So it's quite large, although not as big as perhaps the North American and those other ones, so big enough to be quite visible. It's also quite interesting because the centre of this nebula is actually lit up by what's called a Wolf-Rayet star. Now, these are a very rare star. I think they've only found about 200 in the whole of our galaxy so far, but they burn extremely bright and they have very short lives. And this material around the nebula is actually expelled from the star itself. So if I go on, this is an image I took 2 nights ago using my bigger telescope. But as you can see the Wolf-Rayet star in the center here, lighting up the whole nebula, and this is the material that it's thrown off. So, so this is a supergiant star. It's about this shell was cast off about 180,000 years ago, expanding at over 80 kilometers a second. So yeah, it's just throwing off the outer levels. So this one, all these Wolf-Rayet stars are called WR, and then they have a number, so this is WR136. As I say, there's only a very small number. So if I just stop the share and go back and show you in stellarium exactly where that is. Right, so I'll just go back to the clusters quickly. So that's M3 there. And then just slightly along, we're in sort of southeast-east sky at the moment. That's a snowball cluster, not the only one. So, well, there's Arcturus, which is one of the brightest stars in the eastern sky at the moment. So if I come out, I'll just show you exactly where we are. So there's south. So Arcturus is almost directly south at this point, and that is south. So this one here is M5, the Rose Cluster, which is the one I was just describing to you. That is still pretty southerly. And then if we move this way fractionally, we'll need to go to Hercules, the Hercules Cluster. There's Hercules there, so we go in a bit. and there's a Hercules cluster there. So there's various other clusters here, not quite as bright. These three are the brightest, but certainly worth having a look for them. So that one, the Hercules cluster, is very highly photographed. It's quite a large one, that one. Definitely worth a look. So I'll just quickly show you exactly where the Crescent Nebula is. It's in Cygnus. There's Cygnus there. I'll go forward. So as you can see at the moment, I've got my deep sky objects turned on. I'll just turn those off. It makes it very difficult to see what we're looking at. So you can see Cygnus the Swan there. There's the wings, there's the neck, and there's the body. Now, there's some big nebulas here. I mean, this is the, I think that's the North America. That's the North American nebula there, which you can see roughly the shape of North America. That's a huge nebula. So the one that I was talking about is this one. You can see it's a little bit smaller, but it's still fairly large for a nebula. And that is the Crescent Nebula. And that's just there. Okay, so really that's, unless there's any questions from anybody, that's all I've got to show you at the moment.
Okay, Martin, I can't see anybody's typed in any questions, but if they have, perhaps they can send them.
A hand, oh yeah, someone's clapping. It's either very boring.
Yes, people are finding all the little tricks and so on here, which is good. Can I say thank you, particularly Martin, you're a brave guy. You're the guy who started this off on Zoom. So a very big thank you to you for presenting it. And I must say, absolutely wonderful. Everybody could see it so nice and up close, rather than if you were at the back of the room having a little bit of a problem seeing some of those.
I'm glad. I hope nobody missed when I was showing the stellarium and when I was swapping to the screens, but I know in future how to do that, so hopefully that won't
okay. Okay, well, absolutely brilliant. I love that Hercules cluster. I can remember once up at Bayfordbury showing that to somebody, and they described it like grains of sugar or salt on a piece of black paper. And I thought that was a wonderful description of it. So like I say, thank you very much indeed to you, Martin. I will mute you now. And I'm now going to pass everybody over. I haven't seen any comments coming up, by the way, about any problems, apart from the one we had a little bit earlier about not seeing stellarium. So thank you for using the chat in that way. And so far, if I can just admit one more person, they're late arriving. I hope they brought a note from their mum. I'm now going to pass over to Jerry, who's going to tell you about some of the exciting space exploration things which are going on at the moment. So if everything is working right, the floor is yours, Jerry.
Okay, thanks, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining us, and as has just been said, you'll probably be able to see things much clearer than if you're way at the back of the room at the view. Now I have, as is typical with me, a keynote presentation, because you want to look at pretty pictures and not at me. So I'm going to share my screen, select my second screen, and with a bit of luck, if I flip back to that, you should see things happening on your screen as I come into view. So for those who don't know me, I run Spaceflight UK. I'm a freelance space presenter, and I certainly used to go all over the country giving presentations about space and astronomy. And on the subject of astronomy, we lost a dear friend recently, the Cooper, who many of you will know from The Sky at Night and from many, many books and radio broadcasts that she's given over the years. Passed away earlier this year. Her funeral took place just before the lockdown came into force, and I was privileged to go to that. It was quite something, quite a gathering of people from the astronomy and space community to say our farewell to Heather. So what I want to do is to talk about some things to do with space exploration, what has been going on and what is coming up. And for America, the biggest thing that they're working on is the Space Launch System. And this is an artist's impression of what it would look like on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Those of you who remember the Saturn V will think it looks rather similar, and in fact the paint scheme is deliberately intended to mimic that. However, it's quite possible that the first one won't have an overall white coat of paint, for the same reason that they stopped painting the external tank of the space shuttle, which that was originally white, and then it just became the just left as the foam, because it saved an awful lot of weight. It's amazing how much paint weighs. There we go. It won't, in its initial version, be quite as tall as the Saturn V. It won't be quite as powerful either. So Saturn V will hold the record for a while. So down the center is the core stage, which is made up of several elements. First, there's the engine section at the bottom with 4 RS-25 engines derived from the space shuttle. Then a massive liquid hydrogen tank, an interstage, and then the oxygen tank. And the reason that the oxygen tank is so much smaller is because oxygen is denser than liquid hydrogen. So you can have a similar amount, but taking up less room. And finally, the forward skirt, as it's labeled, although it houses all the computers. So this is the equivalent of the instrument ring at the top of the Saturn V stack. So here's part of the hydrogen tank under construction, and it's made in various sections, makes up a very, very long tank, as you can see in this picture. There it is in the background. And here's the rollout from the Michaud Assembly Facility in New Orleans in January this year. And you can see all the workers there in front of it. And from there, well, in that view, I think gives a really good idea of just how massive the thing is. From there, it was rolled round and loaded onto the Poseidon barge to be taken around the Gulf of Mexico, around the tip of Florida, and up the coast, the Atlantic coast, to Kennedy Space Center. There at the back, you can see the engines. So these are the RS-25 engines. That's a lovely shot of the 4 of them before they were fitted to the stage. And here's one in a test stand undergoing test firing. And this is at the Stennis Space Center. And there are 2 other stands, the B2 stands, which used to be used for testing the Saturn V. They're being adapted for testing the SLS. So there's the central core, but those engines together don't produce enough thrust to get the vehicle off the ground. So like the space shuttle, it's going to have 2 solid rocket boosters. And they are really exactly the same as those used on the shuttle, except that instead of having 4 segments, they're going to have 5. There is one of them being prepared up at the proving grounds in Utah for a test firing, and there it goes. So at launch, the 4 RS-25s will ignite, they'll build up to thrust, and then when the solid rocket boosters are ignited, then you get immediate liftoff, and off it goes. At the top is the Orion spacecraft, and that's an early artist's impression of it, when it was expected that the solar panels would be rotary unfolding. Now they're going to be opening out as panels. One big thing about the solar panels is that should there be anything like the Apollo 13 accident, which took place 50 years ago last month, then the craft would still be able to gain electrical power through solar conversion. So here's the framework in its early stages, and you can see from the people in the background, this is quite some size. I mean, this is designed to carry 6 people into Earth orbit, or 4 people on a flight to the moon, as opposed to the 3 in Apollo. And at the bottom of it is this, the world's largest heat shield. But unlike Apollo, this is designed to, unlike the space shuttle, this is designed to protect the craft, like Apollo, from a lunar re-entry. So that means coming back at 25,000 miles an hour rather than just, he says, 17,500 miles an hour that you get when coming back from Earth orbit. So here's the craft separating from the core stage of the SLS. At the top of it is the launch abort system, which will separate. The adapter panels around the side also come off. And there you can see the conical Orion spacecraft covered in black tiles. And these are very much like the tiles that were put on the space shuttle. But as I've said, operated to be able to withstand 5,000 degrees of heat expected from a 25,000 mile an hour. That's 7.5 miles per second re-entry. Amongst the various tests are the water landing tests, and this is done in exactly the same way at exactly the same facility that they used for testing Apollo. Suspending the craft and bringing it down a slide wire into the pond, and a big splash. And it's not only testing the stability of the craft and everything, but also checking it, dropping it at various angles, and making sure that it can safely land and be in an upside down position. That is what they call stable 2. And like Apollo, it will have flotation bags that will then turn it the right way up to stable 1. At the top, as I mentioned, a launch abort system. On Apollo, it's called the launch escape system. So this was tested with a low altitude abort. You can see the rocket engines at the top of the screen there, and they're firing along with others. And here, the launch abort system being fitted to the top of a test spacecraft. And you can see that there are rockets halfway down the stack. There are also guidance rockets at the very top and others lower down, which aren't obvious. But when you fire them up, it will whiz the spacecraft, put it clear of the rocket stack in literally a couple of seconds. It gets up to over 100 miles an hour to drag it clear in case of any real emergency, either in the last few seconds before launch, during the first couple of minutes of flight. And then it will separate, release the spacecraft, which comes down on parachutes. So as well as the launcher and the spacecraft, there's also the launch facilities, and that's all being set up at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So there, as we saw before, and this is an actual view from Google Maps, showing at the left-hand side the Space Shuttle runway. In the center, at the bottom of the screen, you're looking straight down on the vehicle assembly building, and to the right you can see launch pads 39A and above it 39B. Now the distance from the vehicle assembly building to 39A is 3.5 miles. It was calculated that if every stage of a Saturn V exploded simultaneously, then that is the distance you'd need to be away from it in order to be safe. So 39A is currently being used by SpaceX. It's being converted for use for their Falcon 9 and Falcon 9 Heavy vehicles. The SLS will launch from 39B. There were only 2 Apollos that launched from 39B, Apollo 10 and the Apollo-Soyuz test project flight, which was the very last Apollo, and I saw that launched back in 1975. So there's an angle view. You can start to get an idea of the size of the VAB. Those little dots around it are cars. So inside the VAB, the rockets are assembled vertically, hence it was originally vertical assembly building, and then it became the vehicle assembly building. And to the right, you can see the cutouts of the various heights so that engineers can access the rocket when the vehicle is moved across to fit into the assembly position. What's happened here is that it's on its way out of the VAB. All of those platforms have had to be removed and have been replaced by new ones to take the shape of the new stack for the Space Launch System. And the tower have also been rebuilt. There are 3 mobile launch platforms, and the launch umbilical tower, the ones that used to be red and then is now grey, that has been rebuilt to accommodate the requirements of the SLS. So this is at the front of the vehicle assembly building. You can see it in the background. The 2 grey sections, each of those are doors. The square blocks lift up to the very top, exposing a tall opening for this tower to go through. And to the side there, the lower building is the Launch Control Center. So here's the mobile launcher and the launch tower standing over the flame trench at pad 39B. That's a view of it from the air, and here's the old flame deflector inside being taken out to be replaced with a new one. Now, I've actually stood there in the flame trench. I can add that I've also stood on the roof of the vehicle assembly building, which is why I can claim to have visited Kennedy Space Center from top to bottom. There's the work carrying on there. And to carry the mobile launch platform, the launch tower, and the rocket from the vehicle assembly building, the 3.5 miles, is a crawler transporter. And this is crawler transporter number 2, which has been upgraded for the SLS. There are 2 of these sets of Caterpillar tracks at each corner, and every link in the Caterpillar tracks weighs 1 ton. And there you can see that the people around that, you can see how really big those gears are. That's part of the drive mechanism on one of the Caterpillars. We have new spacesuits as well, not for the orbital flights, but as I've said, Orion is intended to fly to the moon as well. And this is a prototype lunar suit being demonstrated, whereas that's an in-flight suit. And here's Charlie Bolden, the previous NASA administrator, introducing some of the new astronaut candidates with a mock-up of Orion behind them. So this is the main program that the SLS and Orion will be used for, called Artemis, the twin brother of Apollo. And in here you can see the crescent represents not only Artemis's bow and the A representing the arrow flying from the bow, but also that's the Earth and it's going out to the moon. But you can see that the A of Artemis extends beyond the moon, because Artemis is also intended to take astronauts eventually to Mars. For the first flight to the moon, it will perform a flight out from Earth orbit, off to the moon, going to orbit there, and then in this somewhat complicated maneuver, then perform a return burn and come back to Earth. There's other craft though. There's Starliner. This is from Boeing, their CST-100 craft, known as Starliner. A similar kind of size to Orion, in fact a little bit bigger. This is intended to carry up to 8 people. But this is only intended for Earth orbit. This is for supplying crews to the International Space Station. So there it is on top of an Atlas V, undertaking an unmanned test launch. It's expected that a manned flight of this will take place later this year. There's also Blue Origin. This is a company formed by Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon. And this is their New Shepard spacecraft. launched for the first time back in 2015. This is to do suborbital flights, named after Alan Shepard, who performed America's first space flight, which was a suborbital flight. So just going up and coming back down again without going into orbit. Except, of course, as with modern rockets, this one is reusable, both the spacecraft and the launcher. The follow-up to this will be New Glenn, named after John Glenn, who performed America's first orbital spaceflight back in 1962. They also announced a new Armstrong without saying what it would be, but obviously everyone's saying, well, naturally that one's going to go to the moon. However, in May last year, he announced the company's vision for space for the future and announced plans for a moon lander known as Blue Moon. So it's still possible that there will be a new Armstrong spacecraft, but the Blue Moon will be the lander element of that, which will actually go down to the surface, rather like Apollo had a command module which stayed in orbit around the moon while the lunar module went down to the surface. Now, here's something rather different. The X-37B, which looks a bit like the space shuttle, although it's only about half the size. This, as you can see from the markings on it, is from the United States Air Force. And this is an unmanned vehicle, which is launched on an Atlas V, orbits the Earth, doing nobody knows what except a few people in the Air Force, and then comes down and lands on a runway, all completely automatic. This is about the most secret space program that America has. It stays up for a huge amount of time. The last flight ran for 2 years, orbiting the Earth. And the next one is due to go up in a couple of days' time, on the 16th, at about 5 p.m. in the evening. So there may well be live coverage of the launch because obviously you cannot hide an Atlas V taking off, as you can see, but they won't tell you anything about what it's going to do. And here's a view from behind it as it comes down to land on the runway. Now, another big player is Virgin Galactic. They do tell people what they're doing. They show people what they're doing because they want people to take part in it. And for a mere 250,000, you too can take part in what they're doing. They used to phone me up and ask if I was ready to put down a deposit. And I would think about how much the house was worth. But anyway, this is a view of Spaceport America out in the Mojave Desert. And you can actually see two vehicles there. We have White Knight 2, the carrier aircraft, and between the twin fuselage is Spaceship 2, or one of the Spaceship 2s. The idea is that there will be 5 of those and 2 White Knight 2 carriers. So the whole thing takes off on a runway and it carries Spaceship 2 up to about 25,000 feet before it is released. And then the spaceship fires its solid rocket engine at the back, points upwards and shoots up. When the engine burns out, it continues carrying on until gravity pulls it down. But in the meantime, you get about 5 minutes of weightlessness as you go over the top. And you do reach 100 kilometers, 62 miles, which means officially you become an astronaut. And then it comes down and glides back to the runway. So Andy Warhol said, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. Well, now they're saying, in the future, everyone can have a space flight for 15 minutes. SpaceX is the really big player at the moment. This is their Crew Dragon spacecraft, designed to hold 4 people. This is a pad abort test of it. Up it goes and down by parachute, and there is the Crew Dragon sitting on top of what's called the trunk, which provides various services for it, and there's a Falcon 9 of the type that will launch it. So on January the 19th, it did a high altitude, an in-flight abort test. And from that, it's been rated for manned flight. So on the 17th of April, the NASA administrator, Jim Bridenstine, announced the first Crew Dragon to the International Space Station will launch on May 27th. So here are the 4 SpaceX astronauts. Only 2 of them will be flying on each of the first 2 flights. There's Douglas Hurley, Robert Behnken, Michael Hopkins, and Victor Glover. Doug Hurley and Rob Behnken will fly on the first flight. Behnken previously flew as mission specialist on STS-123 and STS-130, and Hurley was a pilot on STS-127 and also STS-135, the very last space shuttle mission. So he has a very special joint record, flying on the last flight to be launched by America and the first flight since then to be launched by America. So in just a couple of weeks' time, America, for the first time since July 2011, will be launching its own astronauts on its own spacecraft from American soil. That's a heck of a long gap. They'll be so glad to be back in business. So what's coming up then? There's some more Starlink satellites going up. How about that? I'm sure you'll all be so delighted that there'll be even more light pollution up there. However, Starlink are going to be launching more what they call dark satellites. So they'll, it's been said, be hardly noticeable. In late April, a Falcon 9 launching unmanned satellite. The United States Space Force 7, that's the X-37B, is going. And then we now know it's going to be May 27th, the Dragon Demo Module 2, and then various other unmanned flights, including, you can see there, the Mars 2020 rover, and I'll be very pleased to see that go, because like all the other Mars rovers, it has my name on it. So I'm going to be landing on Mars again sometime around March next year. Now, if I flip back to my other screen, I'm just trying to find my my cursor. I need to bring that over to my other screen. Oh, there we go. So that I can unshare. And hopefully you can see me again now, folks. So I hope you enjoyed that, looking at all kinds of things going on. I mean, you might have thought, well, I haven't really heard much about what America is doing, but as you can see, there is a huge amount going on. For people like me who've been following the Space Launch System since it was first announced, it's gone through various iterations. There was the Constellation program, which all got built up with a lot of expectation, and then it was cancelled because it was getting over budget and wasn't really achieving much. We had another lunar lander program, which was also cancelled. America has recently asked for solicitations for a human landing system. So they have Artemis, which will get people to the moon with the Orion spacecraft, but they're not developing a lander. So they're asking for private companies to come up with ideas. And there are three main contenders for that at the moment, and we'll wait and see how things go with that. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to put them up.
Okay, Jerry, I'm going to ask everybody if you could use the chat to send in questions. You can either pick to Jerry or to everybody, or I can see one's already come in here. I don't know if you got it on your screen, Jerry, but it says...
okay, yes, I can see some up there. So what are the different badges on the front of the astronaut suit denote? There's a name badge, and it'll be with wings on it if they have actually flown in space. They'll also usually wear a flight mission badge if they have flown before. Sometimes some of them also wear the Shuttle 25-year patch and other commemorative patches.
Okay, have you got that one on there from SUFO? Would the USA have got back into the space race without the private investment from the tech millionaires?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there you're talking about Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. It's interesting because neither of them are actually building the SLS. That's being built by predominantly Boeing and others, just like the Saturn V. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had put in bids to be involved, but as they're developing their own craft, there's the Starliner, but Elon Musk's huge Starship, you know, he may be thinking, well, it's all right, I don't need to do that, I'm doing my own thing. So would they have got back into the space race? Well, I wouldn't say it is a space race. I mean, the original race was to get to the moon. But would they got into the space business? Would they be going back to the moon without all of this other activity going on? And the answer is yes, because there's, well, various reasons. There are all kinds of bits of information that we still want to find out about the moon. I mean, just basic lunar science. But since Apollo, there are other reasons for going back to the moon. One major one is to potentially mine it for helium-3, which is a rare isotope of helium, well, certainly very rare on Earth, but is something that we really want in quantity if we're going to build a number of fusion reactors. So unlike nuclear fission, these will produce electricity through nuclear reactions, but they're self-sustaining. You'll get more energy in, more energy out than you put in, and they won't produce nuclear waste like fission reactors do. But one place to get helium-3 is the surface of the moon. So that's one major reason for going there.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. We've got another question here. I think.
Yeah, any news on the
James Webb.
The James Webb Telescope launch next year, Steve? No, it hasn't really changed that much. It kept getting delayed. I mean, now the thing is, it is complete. They've done all the testing of the unfolding of the mirror and deployment of the sunscreen and so forth. They're quite happy about all that, but it's really budget restraints that have held it back. But I think we can pretty safely say it will go next year. Fingers crossed.
And there's another question there from Paul. Given Challenger, why are the SRBs multi-section?
This relates to the fact that it was a leak in the seal between two of the sections on one of the SRBs on the space shuttle that led to the loss of Challenger. Well, first of all, the seals have been completely redesigned so that the leak of hot gases that happened there couldn't really happen again. And also, I think you can take it as read that they will never launch in with the craft being left out in sub-zero temperatures. I mean, that was just, come on, look, we've advertised it, we're going to do it, we're going to launch. It'll cost money to delay it. Whereas people who weren't looking at it from the cost angle were saying, you'll be damn stupid to launch. And they were. But yeah, it's a redesigned joint, so don't worry.
Okay, thank you for that question, Paul. And there's one there from Peter. Any clues what Russia and China may be doing to get to the moon first?
Well, China has, in fact, announced a lunar, human lunar investigation program, which is sort of interesting. You wonder how much of that is, okay, yes, they're going to do it, but it's going to be a long way down the line. And is it announcing it now propaganda because they just want to remind people, hey folks, we're still in the space business too. I mean, that they've launched a number of spacecraft, the Shenzhou spacecraft, which is a very, 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 very close approximation to a Soyuz. They've also launched 2 space stations, like the Russian early space stations. They're sort of single unit ones. They're called Tiangong. When they launched the second crew to the second Tiangong, I posted a line on Twitter saying it's too new to Tiangong 2. But anyway, since that was deorbited, they haven't put any others up. although they're expected to. And we think the next one will probably be a multi-module space station. And they'll probably do quite a bit of work on that before they do anything major about going to the moon. For Russia, Russia has announced various spacecraft at different times, including the Soyuz Clipper, which was a complete replacement for the Soyuz, and quite advanced craft, but that appears to have been completely cancelled, which is a shame. But they're quite happy rolling off the Soyuz and the Soyuz launcher off a production line which has churned out over 1,000 vehicles. Sort of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It keeps getting tweaked, modified, and I don't know, I guess they'll just keep on carrying on doing that. I'm surprised, really, that that they have done so rather than go for a fully reusable craft. I mean, Soyuz isn't partly reusable at all, so you know, there's quite a fair cost. I think they charged America $56 million every time they wanted to launch an astronaut in a Soyuz up to the space station. So you can see the incentive for America to be doing it for themselves again.
Excellent. Thank you for that one. And we've got a question from John Fraser. Do you think Artemis will get cancelled if Trump loses in November? What makes you think Trump's going to lose? I thought he had it all sorted.
I hope not. I mean, Charlie Bolton was one of the best administrators NASA had. He was appointed by Barack Obama. So guess what happened when the Democrats lost the election? So they change over everybody, even though things like a position like the head of NASA, what NASA does is not specifically political. Yeah, okay, going to the moon was done for political reasons, but exploring space is not itself political. And it shouldn't matter whether the head of NASA is being appointed by a Republican or a Democrat. But having said that, though, Jim Bridenstine is doing a damn good job. If the Democrats should get in next year, will they suddenly want to change things? If they've got sense, no, they won't. There's so much gone into this. All right, Artemis is a project, right? Orion is the craft to carry out that project with the SLS. They're not going to cancel the SLS. So they don't have the full assembly line of SLS production to the extent that they used to have with the Saturn V's. So on that basis, yes, it could be stopped, but all the tooling and the expertise that's been built up in order to construct them, it would be such a stupid waste to throw that away. So no, I think they ought to carry on with that, and certainly carry on flying the Orion spacecraft. Are they going to fly it to the moon? Well, that's what it's designed for. It's designed to be able to be flown to the moon. They're asking people now to submit bids for designs for landing people on the moon. And all being well, last year they pulled forward the date. when it was originally announced, we're going back to the moon, they said for 2028. And that has become 2024. Now, that's going to mean a very fast development of the lander. But yes, it is possible. It is possible. So the other half of that question is if Trump loses in November. You see, now, the thing is that he's telling everybody what a good job he's doing. And the problem with him saying that is that there are far, far, far too many people in America who believe it. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Jerry, for that. And thank you for those super questions. There were no nasty ones there. Okay, so that should just leave me on the air at the moment. Can I say, first of all, a big thank you to Martin and Jerry for being our guinea pigs and going on Zoom and giving us really, two really good talks this evening and showing that Hertford Astronomy group is alive and doing well. So we hit 51 people in the end on our participants, which was really, really good. But let me also say thank you to all the rest of the committee. We've done a fair bit of practice trying to get the hang of how does Zoom work. We held our own meetings on it, pressed buttons, and had all sorts of things. And there's an awful lot been going on in the background there. And I would like to sort of just flag that up to say thank you to all the committee members for your continued support and terrific help of keeping the club going under these unusual circumstances. And of course, I want to say thank you to all of you people who've sent along ideas about what to do for your back garden astronomy. We've had some lovely things that we've been able to post onto the web. Been really, really good there. And do keep them coming in, send your photographs in. We love seeing what you're up to. Doesn't matter how zany or whatever you're doing. Astronomy is whatever you want to make it. We don't sort of have prescribed rules about behavior or dress or brands or anything like that. It's whatever you want it to be. I'm going to flag up on May the 27th. Jerry's already told you there's some terrific stuff going on with the SpaceX flight, but that's also the date of our annual general meeting. Now, don't all turn off. I know annual general meetings don't normally turn people on, but I'm just going to sort of dangle a couple of carrots in front of you and say, we have got some really exciting news to share with you, and we will share it with you at the AGM. So if there was no other good reason, please do come along. We'll send the invites out again so that you can come along and Zoom and send your questions. If anyone wants to join the committee, let us know. All their current committee members have said that they're happy to continue. But, we're always, we don't turn anybody away. Our next challenge, obviously, is to find speakers who will work with Zoom. Because we can understand that social distancing is going to be something that's going to be high on the agenda. So we're not letting Jerry get away with his talk. He's got to go out there now and find some people who are happy to give us Zoom talks as well. So I would like to say thank you to all of you for coming along this evening, for figuring out how to work this wonderful system. It's been great seeing you all there, and we look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time. So from me, the committee of HAG, everybody else, thank you very much indeed. I'm not going to say have a safe journey home. You haven't got to go far, have you? So bye-bye to all of you. Bye-bye now.